Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. Hopefully you can see the screen. And of course, we are just getting started with the story of Dina. Okay, so let me find out where I thought I put, there's the mark. All right. So we've already learned how Shechem has, that is the son of Hamor, who is the leader of the land. His father's the leader of the land, and how Shechem has had intimate relations with Dina, and of course out of wedlock, and also how now he is smitten by her. Okay. So Vayomer Shechem el Hamor aviv lemor. So Shechem said to Hamor, his father, with these words, Kach li et hayalda hazot leisha. Take for me this girl for a wife. Take a look in case we do have Rashis on this. All right, so we don't have any Rashi until verse 7. Vayakov, but Jacob, Shama, had heard, ki timei et Dina bito, that he had defiled Dina, his daughter. Uvanav hayu et miknehu basadeh, and while his sons were with the cattle in the field. Vehecharish Yaakov ad boam, and Jacob was silent until they came. Again, look at Jacob, the change in Jacob, and how he's not so proactive, can't wait to be proactive. He's definitely, maybe we could say, the sadder but wiser man. Vayetze Hamor avi Shechem el Yaakov, and Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob, went out to ledaber ito, to speak to him. Uvnei Yaakov, in the meantime, the sons of Jacob, ba'u min hasadeh keshomam, they came from the field when they heard. In other words, about this incident. But yit ya'atzvu ha'anashim, and the men were greatly distressed. Vayichar lahem ma'od, and they were extremely angry. Ki nevala asa b'Yisrael, because an obscenity was committed in Israel. Lishkav et bet Yaakov, to lie with the daughter of Jacob. V'chein lo ye'esa, and indeed such should never be done. This was never done in the past, I guess, and this never should be done. This was something terrible. Let's take a look at Rashi. V'chein lo ya'aseh. And thus it should not be done. La'anot et habetulot, right? That is, again, to rape, right? The virgins. Sheha'umot gadru atzman. So it's interesting that they're saying this is something that was not done, and he's saying here that the nations, in other words, not just the Jewish people, not just the Israelites, but the people in general, gadru atzman min ha'arayot, they set up a fence against lewdness, al yedei hamabul, after experiencing the flood. In other words, they knew that one of the reasons that the flood took place had to do with the promiscuity that was going on, the wholesale promiscuity that was going on amongst human beings at the time, and they had learned their lesson. And so the idea of this kind of behavior was something that just wasn't done amongst anybody. So certainly Shechem should have known that as well. And that's from Bereshit Rabbah. Vaydaber Hamor itam lemor, and Hamor spoke to them with these words, saying, Shechem b'ni, Shechem my son, chashka nafsho bevitchem. His soul desires your daughter. Okay. Of course, that's to Jacob, but again, I think here it's talking about sister as well. They're sisters, right? So, tnu na ota loli isha, give her, please, to him as a wife. Choshka or Chashka is the way it's, because of this. You see this little line here. It's called a meteg, I believe, and it means that shouldn't be seen as a. If this was not here, I would think that this was a short vowel because of its position. So without this, I would say choshka, but because of this, I'm going to say chashka. So chashka. He says it's chafza. He desires her. Right? He desires her. So Rashi simply translating a less common Hebrew word into one that's more common. Vehitchatnu otanu, and you should marry amongst us, benotechem, your daughters, tenitnu lanu, and your daughters you should give to us, ve'et benotenu tikhu lachem, and our daughters you shall take for yourselves. In other words, into marriage, right? But notice the way in which this is put, and Rashi's going to let us know in a little bit that there's a subtle difference between Hamor's statement to them here and later on when he speaks to his own people. Ve'itanu teshevu, and you shall dwell among us. Va'aretz tieh lifnechem, the land will be before you. In other words, it'll be open for your cattle, etc. Shvu, remain, settle. Usacharuha, and trade in her. Ve'he'achsuba, and not only that, you should take it as an holding, right? You should own property here. So it's interesting that the Torah is setting up a possible shortcut to the ultimate way in which the Jewish people occupied the land of Israel, that there was this particular option, and yet clearly the Torah is not going to allow this option, is going to say this is not a good option. So something to think about. Vayomer Shechem el aviha, and Shechem, the son, said to her father, Ve'el, and to Acheha, and to her brothers, Emtzachen be'enechem, may I find favor in your eyes. In other words, please, may I please you, right? Va'asher tomru elai eten, and whatever you tell me, I will give. So again, smitten with her, willing to give whatever they would demand from him, and you'll see what they're going to say, right? That he's going to probably be shocked by what they're going to tell him. Just checking to make sure we don't have Rashis for the moment. Haravu alai ma'od mohar. You should, in other words, you can demand from me a great dowry, a huge dowry, umatan, and I imagine it means gifts, ve'etna, and I am ready to give it. Ka'asher tomru elai, just as you say to me, utnu li et hanar, and in exchange you should give me the na'ara, the maiden, the isha, as a wife. Let's take a look. Mohar. So he says mohar, again, ketubah, meaning, of course, in this case, we usually understand the ketubah as being an insurance policy for the wedding to protect the wife. Here, I'm sure Rashi is meaning far beyond that, but I think in what he's suggesting is that it be a contract, that it be something written. Okay. Let's keep going. V'ya'anu v'nei Yaakov et Shechem ve'et Hamor aviv b'mirma v'yedaberu. So, and the sons of Jacob, not Jacob, but the sons of Jacob, answered Shechem and Hamor his father, b'mirma, deceitfully. V'yedaberu, and they spoke this. Asher timei. Now the Torah is giving us a reason why they did this. Whether that's an excuse or not, I'm not necessarily going to decide, but it is an explanation. Asher timei, in that he had defiled et Dina achotam, Dina, their sister. Now, the question would be, had he not done that, had he not actually physically had an intimate relation with her, had they done this? And so the fact that the Torah is mentioning this has to be the reason. So things could have gone in a different direction, quite possibly, had there not been any physical contact between Shechem and Dina. Because this is the reason, and maybe the Torah is saying here that's the only reason that we might find excusable. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that for sure, right? So let's take a look. Rashi's. Here we are. Bemirma, interesting. He does not say deceitfully. He says bechokhmah. So the most you might be able to say, chokhmah usually is understood as wisdom. I don't know that Rashi is wanting us to understand it necessarily that way. It could also mean shrewdly, but mirma definitely suggests that that there's deceit involved. Asher timeh, in that he had defiled. Hakatuv omer. So he's saying, scripture's saying, shelo haita remiyah. Interesting. So Rashi's coming down hard on the sign saying that they were not being, they could not be accused of cheating. And possibly, I'll finish the Rashi and try and suggest what the rationale is. Shehare timei et Dina achotam, because he had defiled Dina, their sister. In other words, the biggest cheat that took place was his having relations with Dina, and certainly the scripture is suggesting that it may well have been against her will. She made a mistake going out. I mean, this is trying to look at the whole picture up to this point. She made a mistake going out and about the way she did, and she wound up in trouble as a result of that. But at the same time, Shechem has to take full responsibility for his behavior, because at least the way we're understanding this was not a practice at the time. There wasn't free sex. Okay, it wasn't the 60s or later. This was a very strong moral code, especially having learned the lesson from the flood. So certainly our commentaries and certainly Rashi is saying, and this is from Bereshit Rabbah, by the way, so from our early commentaries are saying that it was totally inappropriate of him to do that. And when you see what they're asking for, the fact is that that what they're saying has a lot to do with the message. So here we go. Keep going. Vayomru alehem, and they said to them, that is to Shechem and Hamor, Lo nuchal lasot hadavar hazeh. We are not allowed to do such a thing that you're proposing, specifically, latet et achotenu leish asher lo orla. To give, that is to give our sister, to give our sister to a man who is uncircumcised. In other words, who has a foreskin. Notice I'm pronouncing this orla. It's a similar situation here, but there's no meteg. So this becomes a kamatz katan. It's the name of the vowel, and it's pronounced orla. Why? Ki cherfa hilanu. For such a thing would be an object of shame. So I know that in some ways it's hard for us to project onto a different culture, but this is part of the culture at the time, and we know that there are places in the world where this kind of culture is part of the culture, which means people understand and support and basically, for the most part, accept that this is the way to behave. And so they're saying, now, the fact that they mention the foreskin obviously is a little bit of a pointing to what Shechem did, right? What he did. So we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. Let's take a look. I want to make sure here. Cherpa, he's saying who? Let me make sure. Let me look. Oops, sorry. 1 second. I think I moved this. Second. Here we go. Let me go here. Let me see. Cherpa he, right? Even though it's got a vav, it's pronounced cherpa is a feminine word. Cherpa he, shemetz pasulhu. So he's saying, so I'm translating cherpa as blasphemy. At least that's the way Jastrow, I believe, translates it. So shemetz pasulhu. So I think that he's saying that this is an indication of pasul means unacceptable, right? Unacceptable. It's lenu with us. That is something considered unacceptable. It's an indication of being of not counting, something like that. Haba lecharif chaveiro. Okay, and Rashi is giving an example from elsewhere. One who comes to, would we say, blaspheme his associate, or merlo, he would say, or maybe it means deeply insult. How about that? To insult his associate, who omerlo says to him, Arel ata, you're uncircumcised, or ben Arel, or the son of one who is uncircumcised. So, so here he goes. Cherpa b'chol makom. Wherever the word cherpa is used in any place, giduf. So I have to look at it as meaning insult, that it has to do with some kind of deep insult. So I want to talk a little bit about the significance of the circumcision. One is it's supposed to indicate high moral behavior, that the idea is that we don't behave like animals. Animals have no control over their sexual urges. Whether or not we agree with this or we don't agree with this is part clearly of biblical Judaism, and certainly rabbinic Judaism consequently. So I could say a traditional Jewish value is to have very high moral standards, and to see and to understand that having intimacy, sexual intimacy, is something that has to be treated as something very holy, and partially because of the ability it gives us to procreate, that it's something actually sacred, and that as human beings, we have that ability to control ourselves. And the idea of the Brit Milah, of the circumcision, underscores that idea. I will tell you something else. I think it also, because of context, etc., that it's also, remember, it's called a brit, right? It's called a covenant, and that covenant has to do with immortality. And the idea of this gift, so to speak, of immortality that was given to Abraham, because Abraham is the first person to be circumcised, and that there is a deep belief that it's all interconnected, that acting in a moral way and not just letting ourselves act like animals is part of something that allows us to achieve immortality as human beings, and takes into account the level of humanity. So I know what I'm saying is not going to be something that people are going to applaud, but I don't want to try and hide back stuff. It's something I think the best way for us to deal with this is to think about it, and just to be open to think about it. We're very influenced, obviously, by our own cultures. So let me see. Ach bezot ne'ot lachem. Okay. Only in this matter will we agree to what you're saying, to your proposal. Im tiyu kamonu, if you will be like us. Remember, they were saying to them, Hamor and Shechem were saying to them, we're going to intermarry. We're going to basically become one nation. So they're saying back, if you're going to be like us, lehimor lachem kol zachar, that you have to circumcise every male. That is something you're going to have to do. Well, it's not an operation that was popular back then either, as we're going to see. Okay, so neot lachem, right? Here we go. He's going to talk a little bit about Rashi's going to talk a little bit about the grammatical construction as well. So he's saying basically what it's saying, and this is according to Sefaria, nitratze, we will consent lachem to you. Lashon, and this is a language, and this is let's see, Kings 2, the second book of Kings, chapter 12, Vaye otu hakohanim. It means the priests agreed. And this is with regards to Yehoyada. The priests were taking a certain donation that people were making that was supposed to go for the restoration and the repairs of the temple, and they weren't doing anything about it. And the priests and Yehoyada was saying to them, this isn't something you should be doing, to take the money. And so they agreed. They didn't want to go to the trouble of supervising the repairs on the temple, but they also agreed they wouldn't take any of the money either. Okay. Lehimol, to circumcise. Liyot namu, right, to be circumcised. Eino lashon lif'ol. So he's saying lehimol, right, is not an active. It doesn't mean to be to circumcise. It means ela lashon lehipael. It means it's passive, to become circumcised. V'natnu, and in that case, natnu et benotenu lachem, we will give our daughters to you. Ve'et benotechem nikach lanu, and your daughters we will take for ourselves. Ve'yashavnu etchem, and we will dwell with you. V'hayinu la'am echad, and here we go. There it is, quite explicitly. And we will become one nation. So make sure I am covering everything here. Yes. V'nachnu, right? So it says nachnu, and he simply says nun shniya. V'nitanu. Here it is. Let me find it here. V'natanu. Now, I think the print is actually missing a dot, a dagesh, in this nun here. This is what Rashi's referring to, is this second nun. And he says it's degusha, meaning it has a dot, and he tells us what the value of the dot is, which is to double the letter. So here we go. Okay, nun shniya mudgeshet. He says the second nun has this dagesh. It doesn't in our text, but apparently I would say that it's because our text is imperfectly printed. Lefi shehi meshameshet become shnei nunin. And the reason you put in a dagesh is to indicate the fact that the letter is doubled. And he says the way you might want to pronounce it is venitananu or venitnanu. Right, the second nu is we will, right, and the natan, this nun, belongs to the root word natan. So he's simply explaining why it has a dagesh in it, because generally it doesn't look at this. So here we go, v'halach nu. Do you see there's no dagesh here? V'lakach nu, no dagesh there. So he's saying, in case you notice that, this is the reason. Ve'et benotechem nikach lanu, and your daughters we will take for ourselves. So, interesting point Rashi wants to let us know. Ata motze, you find betnai she'amar Hamor leYaakov, right, that the condition that Hamor said to Jacob, Uvechuvat bnei Yaakov lachamor, and also this answer now that the sons of Jacob gave to Hamor, shetalu hachashevut bivnei Yaakov, that they put a preference, right? They hung a preference on the sons of Jacob. In other words, in this condition, likach benot Shechem, that they would decide which daughters of Shechem, right, or et sheyivcharu lahem, that they would want to choose for themselves, uvnotehem yitnu lahem, and they would give, in other words, again, the sons of Jacob would give their daughters, they'd decide which of their daughters, or if they were willing to give their daughters to them. lefi datam, according to their will. In other words, this all was going to as to which daughters they took from the I think they were Hivites. They would decide, and which of their own daughters they'd give to the men of the Hivites would be their, or the Shechemites, if you want to say, they would decide as well, right? Let's keep going here. Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to find the place. Right. Dichtiv, as it states, v'natnu et menotenu, and we will give our daughters the fidatenu, which implies according to our desire, our thoughts, ve'et benotechem nikach lanu, again, and your daughters we will take for ourselves, kachol asher nachpotz, those just as we desire. However, ukeshedibru Hamor u'Shechem beno el yoshvei Iram. However, when Hamor and Shechem, his son, spoke to the dwellers of their city, right, the Shechemites, when they spoke to the Shechemites, hafchu hadvarim, they reversed the words. And they said, Et benotam nikach lanu, they said, their daughters we will take for ourselves, lanashim, as wives, ve'et benotenu niten lahem, and their daughters, and our daughters we will give to them. Kedei l'rotzatam, and Rashi is saying, and the reason they reversed it was to appease them, sheyeh otu lehimol, so that they would agree to be circumcised. So they switched the deal. They didn't actually say what the sons of Jacob had said or what they had initially proposed themselves, because they knew if they said that, they would, the people of Shechem would say, forget about it. So let's stop here. Okay. And we will, I believe we're here. I'm going to double check. Okay. Nope. Here we are. Okay. So we're on verse 17. We'll go right there. And I'm going to stop the share. All right. A lot of drama going on here. So